And for those who may be joining for the first time and not connected with me or Genesis 123, invited through a friend or some of the online sources, the articles that I've written, I'm Jonathan Feldstein. I have the privilege of serving as president of the Genesis 123 Foundation. It's a US nonprofit, but I'm based here in Israel. It's now 9:03 p.m. on Saturday night, the 21st of June. I'd like to congratulate myself and my wife Lori on our 33rd wedding anniversary today. And yeah, that's a nice thing.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And one of the things that I always say, the mission of Genesis 123 Foundation is to build bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel. We always say in ways that are new, unique, and meaningful. And what that means is that I'm not going to be trying to copy or emulate or compete or look to break into something that someone else is doing, but look for new ways, new avenues, things that aren't done, haven't been done. And I always say, with mutual respect from our respective traditions. There are so many things, more things than not, that we as Jews and Christians have in common, and we should underscore those all the time. And on those things that we don't agree, that's great. We can have really meaningful, warm, respectful engagements and conversations about that. And I believe learn from one another. But that's thank you, George. Yeah, I'm very excited about our anniversary. We spent Shabbat today talking about the highlights. My kids pressed us to come up with the top three highlights of in 33 years, but that's for another conversation. One of them is the fact that we're here in Israel. I do invite you to come visit. Pastor Mark, you just mentioned last time you were here was in January after the October 7th massacre. We have two fabulous programs coming up. Root and Branch is a partnership with my very dear friend who you all must get to know, Marzi Amirizadeh. She is an Iranian-born woman who became a Christian in Iran, then was arrested and sentenced to death because she became a Christian in Iran. And her first trip to Israel was 7 months before the war began here. And we've now partnering on a fabulous program called Root and Branch, which is to bring Christians to harvest olives specifically from wild olive trees. You know the reference, in and along the Gaza border area. We have the first program around the Christian program around the Jerusalem Marathon called Run for Zion. And all of this, and my point is not to do a commercial promotion, but to engage. I really aspire to creating meaningful relationships, and I want you to be in touch with us. If this is your first time, you'll get updates from us coming up. If not, or either way, visit genesis123.co to engage directly and be part of what we're doing. As I mentioned, this is the third of three. I've got requests for others, and I do want to mention I'm planning to be in the US in August, September, and then again, end of November, December. So I always welcome opportunities to have conversations like this in person. And again, as I mentioned at the outset, I really value, and this is a conversation for us to have a conversation. Please think of questions. I will give you as substantial an update as I can and ask that you use the Q&A feature that I can engage on anything, whether I'm raising a topic or not raising the topic. I do want to welcome and thank my new friend, Pastor Mark Cooper in Illinois, and my longtime dear friend, Pastor Marian Engineeri in Arizona, for joining here and helping me to moderate your questions and raise their own. I know them and their heart for Israel, and I want them to help prompt me in directions that are meaningful for all of you. But also, we're living in a strange time, and at any moment, you might hear an air raid siren. Well, my phone is propped up here, so I can see the advance notice of an air raid siren coming, and you will hear an air raid siren. If that happens, I will excuse myself and go to the bomb shelter probably for 10, 15 minutes and leave it up to Marian and Mark to keep up the conversation and the prayers. With that, I debated today whether to start with some scripture or a joke. I'm going to go with a joke. There's a great joke, and one of the ways that we're existing here with this war is through humor. And there's a great joke and meme that's going around that that there's an Israeli Mossad operative in Tehran who goes into a store and bumps into somebody, and in Hebrew says "Slicha," excuse me, giving away his cover as an Israeli, and realizing that he did so at that moment. And the person who we bumped into and said "Slicha" to looks at him and says, "Hakol beseder, achi." Don't worry, brother. Indicating how well infiltrated Iran is and has been with significant intelligence, certainly Israelis and almost certainly Iranians as well. There's a lot of humor, and we need a lot of humor. We need to be able to laugh, but we also take a lot of our inspiration these days, as we must, from God, from our faith, and from Scripture. And today, as I was immersing myself on Shabbat in this week's Torah portion, which is called Shalach from Numbers 13, where Moses is commanded to send 12 spies. I speak about that a lot when I'm doing public engagements, and I'm not going to speak about the whole nature of it, but the end of it. One of the things, those of us who are all versed in Bible, old or new, know verses, and one of the amazing things that it's always alive. I'm 60 years old. Today's my 33rd anniversary. I've been reading the same verses year in, year out for a whole lot of years, but every year it presents itself as different. And today, at the very end of the Torah portion, which is uh, which is Numbers 15, verse 40 and 41. It struck me, we're talking, the Torah portion begins with the spies, and there's a lot of commentary this week about the sin of the 10 spies and what they did, and the empowerment of Joshua and Caleb. I'm not going to go that way. That's so obvious and so rich, and I'm happy to share some of the commentaries that I've seen so far. But something that struck me that's so mundane because it's repeated so many times. Verse Numbers 40 verse Numbers 15 verse 40 41, so that you remember, this is in the context of wearing tzitzit, the ritual fringes that we do on the corners of our garments. Why? God says, so that you remember and perform all my commandments and be holy to your God. I am Hashem, your God, who has removed you from the land of Egypt to be a God unto you. I am Hashem, your God. Now, there are two things that struck me. The commandment for tzitzit, wearing the fringes on the corners of our garments, is something that we still do. That's normal, and there are other references to Gentiles holding on to the corners of the garment, to these very fringes. And what's fascinating to me is that this is just one of 613 commandments that we as Jews observe, or try to observe our best from the actual scripture and rabbinic interpretation. And it's one of 613. Why is 613 significant? I'm going to be writing about this, and I hope I'll share it, though I don't normally share my personal writing with my Genesis 1, 2, 3 group. The war started, our operation started on June 13th, 613. There were some other notes here. There was another one. The 613 is the number of commandments. And Esther, verse 613, is super significant to what we're talking about today, because that's where Haman himself, remember or if you will, the original Persian genocidal anti-Semite, says to his wife, this guy Mordecai is being a pain in my butt. And she says, yeah, but if he's Jewish, you're going to lose. Read the verse, depending on the translation. There's so much in Numbers, and I'm not overdoing it, but I just caught that 613 is very significant. But then God mentions again, taking you out of Egypt. And I will, if I remember, expand upon this a bit. Taking us out of Egypt. When was the last time? Okay, we had the Independence War, 1948-49. We had the Six-Day War, miraculous. I just published an article that's been widely circulated, Town Hall and other websites, called Six-Day War 2.0, right? But we're in day 9 since the beginning of Operation Rising Lion. Six-Day War 2.0. We're seeing miracles that are of biblical proportion right now. Biblical proportion that took several months, over which God made miracles happen in Egypt, reminding us that He's the God who took us out of Egypt. He's the covenantal God who made a covenant with forefathers of the people who left Egypt, the slaves who left Egypt, that nobody who left even knew, and brought us here to the land over 2 generations. And here we are. Here I have the privilege of being here in the land 1 full generation. We're 9 days into this operation, 624 days since the horrific Hamas massacre and attack on Israel, October 7th of 23. And we cannot forget, because we are forgetting this week, still 53 hostages who are held in captivity. I know that there are many questions, and I do want to answer them. I'd like to give an overview. I'm not going to speak so much about the military successes, because the military successes are a little bit less significant now. Not that, no, bad phrase, not less significant, but much more known. And I would encourage you to go back, and I'll share the link to the previous briefings that I've done, talking about the specific military successes. What we've seen, and I want to put it in the proper context today as we're speaking. The war is still going on in Gaza. This week, my oldest son, who's a reservist paratrooper, went to the funeral of one of his good friends' brothers, who was killed in Gaza. That war is still going on. People are still fighting. People are still being killed. And that may be less existential, but is directly related to where we are today. What we're seeing, and again, and I should preface this, it was an unusually quiet Shabbat as compared to a week ago. So much so that I thought, no way this could be happening. We actually had a day of rest, although that rest was with looming angst, because we expected at any point we were going to have to go to the bomb shelters. We have to remember that at about 3 a.m. our time last night, there was another rocket attack, missile attack. If I say missile rocket, I mean missile. These are huge missiles. You can see I filmed them coming in from the east on my on the Genesis 123 Foundation YouTube channel, because I've been outside when they're happening. It is a war crime of unbelievable proportion, that they are directly and deliberately targeting our civilian populations. Thank God there are still miracles, but it's a gross double standard, because the world is looking on. And Pastor Mark, you were just alluding to it in a slightly different context, but the world is looking on and at best acknowledging that, yes, Israel's doing their dirty work and suffering the losses and consequences, but the double standard in terms of us specifically targeting in a way that just, yes, there's human intelligence, there's superior military success, but all of it's divine hand of God appointing all of this, and it's visible, it's remarkable, it's indisputable. um Again, today was super quiet, this Shabbat. I'll speak about what that means and how specifically on Shabbat what we do, because it's different. There were more missile attacks yesterday, just before the last one that I filmed, where I could actually see missiles coming in, breaking out of the atmosphere and going toward the southern part of Israel, where a day earlier one of our hospitals had been hit. That in of itself was a miracle on many levels, and I can address how and why. But first and foremost, that hundreds, if not thousands, of people weren't killed in the hospital. But now Israel's down a whole bunch of hospital rooms in the midst of a war, and it's the hospital that's the stage 1 hospital that's closest to the Gaza border. So that's very significant. Last week, or this week, we're still in this week, the U.S. Embassy issued evacuation orders here for staff and advisory to Americans who want to leave. That it's so some Americans like myself, not myself, are joking, well, maybe we haven't been to America in a while. It's a time for the U.S. Embassy to give us a free trip. Not really, but people are actually fighting more to get back. As many as 150,000 Israelis had been stranded when the skies shut down and the airport shut down 9 days ago, then are leaving. and that's encouraging. And I like to joke also that we've had so many successes in targeting some of Iran's military leaders that we are probably, someone can call up the Guinness Book of World Records and identify some of the shortest military careers in history, because not only have military leaders been taken out, but their successors have been taken out. And as of the news that I just read after Shabbat ended today, the Supreme Leader has appointed a team of three to follow up in the event that he is also taken out. Very quickly, what was miraculous at the beginning? In case you don't know, at 3 a.m. on Friday, the 13th of June, our time, all of Israel was awakened with an air raid siren, sending us to the bomb shelters. Now, there had been a lot of disinformation about if and when this attack was going to come. There was no imminent threat at that moment. But what happened, we believe, is that Israel was putting all of us on high alert with the attack beginning in Iran, that potentially thousands of ballistic missiles were about to be headed our way. And it only takes about 10 to 12 minutes for an Iranian missile to hit its target here in Israel. An Iranian missile to hit its target, yeah. We had at one time as many as 200 aircraft participating in this initial wave of attack. And I understand now we have, at some point, it's a huge country. It's double the size of Texas, but we have at certain places 24/7 air coverage in Iran with Israeli fighter planes, also mostly taking intelligence, specifically, as I understand, relating to the missile launch sites, and we'll come back to that. And if I forget, then please remind me. But these are all very important. Targets have included their airports, their nuclear sites, which is ultimately the real critical reason why we're doing this. The Air Force Base, one of the most bold operations within this miraculous boldness, was a 2,300 kilometer reach of 1,400 miles, an attack on an Iranian airbase and refueling plane in Mashhad, which is in northeastern Iran. That I don't know if that goes down, if we're talking about world records, as the longest operation in history, but that's a huge stretch, and that's quite remarkable. Hundreds of ballistic missiles, maybe more, have been destroyed, and the launching sites. Let me mention the launching sites, why that's critical. Even if they have the ballistic missiles, so we're taking out the missiles and their ability to produce more missiles, if they don't have the launching sites, then they can't launch them. So unlike what we saw April a year ago and this past October, where they launched 100, 200, 300 ballistic and cruise missiles all at the same time, what we're seeing, what we saw yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, was 23, plus or minus. But I want you to get a sense that we're not talking about hundreds, we're talking about dozens. Unfortunately, even with a 90 to 95% success in taking them down, we're still having direct hits, casualties, tremendous loss. I'll come to that later on. But these attacks, the missile production sites, the to the extent that they had an air force, the operative word is had. Uh, with the underground sites, what we haven't yet targeted is the main, well, the Supreme Leader himself, which I'm glad to opine on, and the main Iranian nuclear facility called Fordo, which is buried deep under a mountain. I don't recall the logistics, but you can Google that. It doesn't matter physically where it is. We can reach it. The question is, will it be targeted, and can we, as Israel, do it alone? Or will it require the B-52 stealth bombers that are apparently moving closer from the US? President Trump says he's waiting 2 weeks to make a decision. This, as I said before, there's been tremendous analysis here over the last week of what happened. The Friday Jerusalem Post, that is here on my right, had some great articles and coverage. It's years and years of collective intelligence, planning, and execution that have taken place, and indeed miracles. And on all of that level, it's truly impossible not to see God's hand. It's one of the reasons, though, coming back to my analogy and why I specifically chose to share that verse from Numbers at the conclusion of the this week's Torah portion. I think it's arguable, and we can argue it or certainly discuss it. The last time God showed his divine might on a global presence like this was in fact the plagues in Egypt, was in fact the Exodus from Egypt, right? That Egypt was the world's superpower. And that took several months. We could argue for sure that the Six-Day War was one of those, but we've now dwarfed exceeded, excuse me, the Six-Day War in by 50%. And this has no end in sight. And I've been praying about this and thinking a great deal. So why? Why can't this be done in 6 days? Will it have to take several weeks or several months? And what the outcome will be? And that's very unsettling not to know. I wrote in my article, I wondered, I was alive, but I don't remember it. In Israel, on day 4 and 5 of the Six-Day War, did we know that the war was almost over? Did we know that the fighting and the suffering and the losses that we had suffered were going to be ending on day 6? I don't know if that's the case. But what I do believe now is that the evil that we are up front against is so great that the loss and the destruction which we're seeing needs to be that much greater because the consequences, it's not just for Israel, it's for the United States, it's for the West, it's for deterrence against other threats and enemies. Certainly, I put China and Russia on the list. Locally in our neighborhood, I put the very inappropriate member of NATO, which is Turkey, whose president is directly and overtly threatening Israel, more so than many Arab countries, than most Arab countries. And I also see, we'll talk about it in a little bit, that it's that much greater, which is why God is reminding us now this week about the Exodus from Egypt, because that was that huge miraculous event, superhuman, right? Really. And we're seeing that today. And the defeat of Iran, as he prophesied in Jeremiah 49, and I'm going to come back and talk about that in a little bit, need that much more of a global stage. I believe it, and if I'm wrong, it still gives me comfort. Last night was shockingly the best night of sleep I got. At around 3 in the morning, we heard an indication that there was something going on. Our phones and all the electronic devices are not in the bedroom with us, so we were sleeping. My daughter-in-law said she woke up and went to the bathroom and saw my youngest son, but he doesn't remember waking up. My older daughters, who were here for Shabbat, also remember hearing something but didn't pay attention to it. My older son woke up this morning and said, "Wow, I don't remember the last time I got 8.5 hours of sleep." I can tell you that I haven't in forever. I've been averaging 3, 4, at best 5. And until last night, almost every night, we've been wakened in the middle of the night with the threat of incoming missiles. I referred to it as just being constantly bleary-eyed, and that's resonating with a lot of us. And I'll allude to that in a little bit. I do again want to call your attention. This video will be posted, and you can see other things that I've been sharing about this on the Genesis 123 Foundation YouTube channel. Right now, more than 24 people in Israel have been killed, all civilians. Hundreds have been injured. And as of the last count before Shabbat, around 5,000 people are homeless. There was an article that we read, and it's funny, living here, we're not even getting all the information, but an article that we read from Friday's Jerusalem Post. In one town south of Tel Aviv called Bat Yam, there was a direct hit. 7 or 9 people were killed there instantly. 109 buildings, 109 buildings were hit, 20% of which irreparably and have to be demolished and rebuilt. So you get a sense of the tremendous damages and people being dispersed, displaced, homeless. We just this past week launched a project to help families who are newly homeless specifically with their kids, to replace toys and games. Why? Because if a kid is happy, the parent has less stress and maybe will be happy him or herself. And that's a way that we can make a direct targeted impact and not do something temporary. That if they're living in a hotel or a new rented apartment that's not their home, if we buy them a new toy or a game, that's something that they can keep with them and bring back to their new home whenever they're able to go back. So I invite you to consider joining us on that. At the same time, my oldest son, we talk about this a lot over Shabbat. We're witnessing one of the greatest moments in Jewish history. My son was talking about some of the Jewish friends and relatives that we know who live overseas and what a shame it is. Think about it. We're in the middle of this war, and he's a paratrooper, and he was saying what a shame it is that they're not here because they're observing from the sidelines. They're not part of this history that will be so pivotal today, tomorrow, and in the future. There are many, many examples of how resilience is and must play a part of it. The humor that I alluded to at the outset, but a week ago, no, earlier this week. Sorry, it's all a big blur. Earlier this week, my daughter and son-in-law and their four sons came to visit us for a little bit. We live in the same town. It's not far away, but since there are no schools, no preschools, they're home alone with my son-in-law also being in reserves again now. They're home alone with their four little boys who are under 7. And that's a handful on the best of occasions. Imagine when you have to worry about air raid sirens, and even with two parents scooping up four little people and bringing them into the bomb shelter. So my kids have taken to putting their 3 older kids to sleep in the bomb shelter, which is a comfort for everybody, but it's very abnormal. And who knows what and for how long the trickle down will be. So it was also a respite for them to come here. We cooked. I took them out to ice cream. I wrote an article about that ice cream experience. You can Google it, called Ice Cream with a Bomb Shelter on Top, talking about some of the surreal, normal things that we're existing with. So it's a respite for them, and we need to give that to them because no matter how old your kids are, you're always their parent, even if they're parents. And we need to always help our kids to help them to make their lives as easy as possible. So I asked my daughter, is there any chance that they might also come and spend Shabbat here with us? Since we don't travel, we don't go in the car. They live about a 30, 40-minute walk from us. It's not a horrible walk, but it's a lot with four little people. So she said no, actually. And the reason why was because she said they have so many friends whose husbands have been called up in her neighborhood that they all need to be there for one another, which is really remarkable. Matter of fact, yesterday, the video that filmed and put on YouTube before Shabbat began, my third daughter was there playing with my nephews in a park. And fortunately, one of them had to go to the bathroom, so they were all on their way back home anyway when the air raid siren alert came and they all raced back to get into their bomb shelter. Let me talk about Shabbat. Shabbat for a lot of Christians specifically is a great concept. It happens to be one of the top 10 commandments, right? We know that biblically, and also for other conversations, but not everyone understands how we as Orthodox Jews observe Shabbat. I always tell people I'm unplugging. My radio's off, my TV's off, my computer's off, my phone is, well, since this began 9 days ago, we've been instructed on both weeks to keep the phones on, but we keep them on silent, which the Homefront command can break into, can hack into to tell us, and they have, and they do on a daily basis when there's an alert coming in to be prepared. We get about 10-minute warning maximum. So we just for instance, Marion, you were, I think, the only person who's here live with us who was in my home, but my old home. You haven't been in my apartment since we downsized. We're on the 7th floor. It's an elevator building, even to the point that we don't push the buttons on the elevator. There's a special program on Shabbat, so it runs automatically. And anyone who's been to Jerusalem on Shabbat knows that sees that and gets into an elevator and the buttons don't work, and that's a little confounding. We can have a whole conversation about Jewish observance of Shabbat, but normally our phones are not on, and we're certainly if we're leaving them on, we're not scrolling for news. It's there for security, it's there for safety, and the reason why is it's potentially life-threatening because all the laws of Shabbat, all the things that we don't do are thrown out the window in the preservation and protection of life. We also have something called the silent radio station. There are many of them. We had to figure it out. It's hard to tune into it because you don't know if you're actually in it or not. But the point of a silent radio station is you can leave your radio on all during Shabbat. It's not playing music. It's not giving you news updates every half hour. You're not hearing commercials for X, Y, and Z or other things that would normally be just blaring from a radio. It's silent unless and until there is an announcement of an alert in part of the country. That's what my wife and I heard last night from the radio that was outside our bedroom at about 3 o'clock in the morning. The radio station, they break in just with the announcement and then they go away. And then when we're in the bomb shelter, they remind us to sing Shabbat songs. They remind us that we're supposed to keep Shabbat and have it still be joyous, and to try to make the normalcy, the abnormalcy of Shabbat as normal as possible. But until today, there were very, very few people outside. And last week, there were no prayer services at all. Today, we were allowed to have prayer services up to 30 people, as long as you're within proximity to a bomb shelter that will accommodate all those people within 90 seconds. So this is how we've been dealing with the whole Shabbat thing. And what's a bomb shelter, right? I realize in having these conversations, people don't know. We have a two-story apartment. The room right below where I am is my oldest son's bedroom. It's a bomb shelter. The walls are extra thick steel reinforced concrete. It is a special metal door that seals shut. It's actually kind of hard to shut. And steel shutters on the window so that when you slide those through, it prevents shrapnel from coming in. But what we've also been instructed to do is take out the glass windows because any explosion outside or the hedef, it's a new Hebrew word I learned and I can't, the impact, the blast from an explosion nearby will shatter all the windows in the house. So now we're instructed all to have closed shoes, to keep closed shoes in the bomb shelter. So in the event we have to get out, we don't rip open our feet in the process. We have water, we have power bars, we have peanut butter and crackers, gluten-free food, not gluten-free food. Everyone's got different things in their bomb shelters because it had been anticipated that we might be, and it was the case at the beginning of this operation, for an hour or more. Matter of fact, one night, in one of the blurs, we were sent to the bomb shelter, I think 1 o'clock in the morning. I fell asleep on my son's bed. My wife had a hard time waking me up, so she just left me, which was fine. And at 3:30 in the morning, I woke up completely oh, that was last Shabbat. That was a week ago. I completely unaware of anything that had happened. I have to confess that until 8 or 9 days ago, I was very dismissive and quite annoyed about the whole bomb shelter thing. Oh, by the way, we're very lucky because new construction, and I say new construction in Israel, I'm talking about homes within about 30, the last 30 years. We have our own personal bomb shelter. We don't even have to leave our house. Don't have to leave the comfort of our own home. We can set up the bomb shelter in any way we want. We can put games for the kids, food, snacks, whatever we want. It's our private bomb shelter. Older buildings, specifically in cities, have communal bomb shelters. That's a little bit different because it takes a lot longer to go there. But we've heard since this operation began multiple instances of people whose lives have actually been saved because their buildings took a direct hit and they were in the shelter. Matter of fact, last week, after one of the air raid sirens, the radio was on and listening, and I happened to hear, it didn't make sense for me for a while. There was this man talking about being saved in the bomb shelter. What I didn't realize was because his building had took a direct hit, he was stuck in his bomb shelter. He couldn't get out, but he was safe. So I take the whole bomb shelter thing very, very religiously. I also wrote an article which you can Google called "What's in Your Bomb Shelter?" Oh yeah, we have the analog phone in case our power goes out and we can't use our regular phones and there's no cell service. So all of this stuff has to be considered. Um, War preparations. We didn't know it at the time. But as I said, they woke us up at 3 o'clock in the morning on the 13th of June in anticipation of 1,000 or more missiles being fired. It's also part of my analogy to the lead up to the Six-Day War. I heard somewhere in the course of the last week, Israel is expecting as many as 4,000 casualties in the immediate aftermath of the operation. As a result, they put us in the bomb shelters to protect us. As a result, we had refrigerator trucks ready to go in the event that mass casualties needed to be kept somewhere. It's crazy. Week ago, when this whole thing started, people were out in the stores shopping, hoarding, binging on anything that they could get that was perishable. I will say this, certain supplies are less available, though we're very lucky to see more or less the pace of life continue. I don't want to begin to wrap up just with a couple of other um, headlines that I'll talk about, headings, and then uh, come to your questions. I mentioned this to a degree already. Our first job is taking care of our kids, whether you're parenting six children from 19 to 32 or four children from 6 to 9 months or anything in between. That doesn't mean that we don't all have our stresses, right? And that we have to somehow superhumanly do our best to compartmentalize them as we are taking care and addressing the needs of our kids. That applies to me and my six children and now three children-in-laws. It applies to my grandchildren. It applies to all of us. We've seen parents for the last 20 months step up with their adult children with who have their own kids, stepping up to miraculously, superhumanly help out in any way possible, specifically where mostly husbands, but not exclusively, have been called up into reserves, not once, not twice, but multiple times. We're in day 624. Some people have served for more than half of that time in reserves. It makes it hard to work if you have your business of your own. It makes it impossible. If you're at home working and your kids are at home, not at school, it makes it hard to keep up with the kids and work and keep any sense of normalcy and dealing with the exhaustion that comes with it all. That is multiplied many, many, many times. I asked, there's one fabulous organization that we fund in Sderot, which is the city that's right on the Gaza border. They work with at-risk youth. I said, what are your needs right now? Their needs, the after-school programs are obviously shut because you're not allowed to have gatherings, although that may come back soon. They said the biggest need right now is helping the families of reservists. And in that one town of 30,000 people, she said there are hundreds that we need to help. So hopefully we're going to be doing that. There's an economic impact. I mentioned, of course, if you're not working, you might be lucky and have a job that's still paying you, but if you're not working, if you are a salaried employee or every hour you work is something that's billable and you're not able to do, you don't have income. And at the same time you don't have income, we're seeing prices increase on a lot of things. Just supply and demand, and the supply and demand is exacerbated by the fact that there are very few, if any, imports or exports right now because our airspace is virtually shut down. So people who are stressed enough are now stressed the fact that what did I buy this week? I don't remember what it was, but it struck me. It was 50% more than what it normally would be. Multiply that times tens of thousands. In Judaism, I'm sure most of you have probably heard this phrase. It was made very popular in the movie Schindler's List, although I don't know that it was actually articulated then. It's from the Talmud. He who saves one life has saved an entire world. The converse is also true. When a single person is lost, is killed, that's the loss of an entire world for that person's immediately family. Thank God the total number of casualties has been relatively low, a fraction of what Israel was expecting as a worst case scenario. We're not done yet by far, and there are worst case scenarios that I can still imagine. But we're comforted by the fact that we have this system that works, and yet this tremendous paradox that they're deliberately targeting civilians, and we know that. And while we provide early warnings to people in Tehran and Gaza and Lebanon and Yemen to get civilians out of the way, they're deliberately targeting our civilians. And that makes the number of casualties all that more significant because it's so low and miraculous. But I don't want to diminish the loss or injury of anyone. When I ventured out for the first time, and I think only time this week, to Jerusalem, I found the street. Oh, actually, Pastor Mark, I was in for a meeting and got a call from Bishop Robert Stearns. Could I come and have a chat with him? So I drove to where he was staying. And as I was walking into the hotel that evening, there was an air raid siren. So we had our visit in the bomb shelter of his hotel. And on my way there and on my way home, I noticed something profound. The streets are empty, no traffic. What could take me in traffic an hour, hour plus. It's very short distance, my home to Jerusalem, but there's still lots of traffic. Took me 25 minutes. I got into Jerusalem so early, I figured, let me quickly go into the mall and pick something up. The mall was open, but in the four floors of the mall, the only one store that was open was the grocery store. Everything was closed. Everything was deserted. And it's opened up more since then, but it's that sense that people are, because of what I said before about needing to be within 90 seconds of a bomb shelter, it's keeping people close to home properly. Now, I only thought about this past week in the context of all these briefings. I've also done a huge number of radio and TV interviews this week. There's something remarkable. All of you who know and love and care about and pray for Israel know about the many prophecies relating to Israel. I don't know how many, but there are a lot. And it only struck me this week to actually Google it and find out how many prophecies are there that don't relate to Israel. And I think there were only seven. One of them, and whether it's 7, 8, 10, 12, is remarkable because we know, for instance, my kids joke that I'm an old man walking the streets in Jerusalem is prophecy. My kids and grandchildren playing in the streets, much less in Hebrew. The fact that Mary, in the house that you came to visit, we had fruit trees that we could pick fruit and taste the prophecy of the land blossoming again. All of that and more are things that we live. What's one of the prophecies that I think has been Googled more this week than any time since it was written by Jeremiah? Jeremiah 49, verse 35 to 39. 2,500 years ago, Cyrus freed the Jews from captivity, from exile, and allowed us to come home to rebuild Jerusalem and restore Jewish sovereignty. Today, it's the Jewish state that's actually potentially, I hope, uh, maybe freeing the Persians. And that's not only cool, but it's significant in terms of this prophecy. The prophecy in Jeremiah is one of the several where God speaks of another place, not Israel, not the Jewish people, and specifically by name. And I don't recall what translation this comes from, but it bears reading here. Verse 35, this is what the Lord Almighty says: See, I will break the bow of Elam, the mainstay of their might. What's Elam? That's modern Iran. That's Persia. 36, I will bring against Elam the four winds from the four quarters of heaven. I will scatter them to the four winds, and there will not be a nation where Elam exiles do not go. I will shatter Elam before their foes, before those who want to kill them. I will bring disaster on them. Even my fierce anger, declares the Lord. I will pursue them with the sword until I have made an end of them. I have to stop. I don't know. Maybe someone can make a comment here. How many times does God talk about his anger, much less his fierce anger? Not a lot. Probably no more times than there are prophecies about places not relating to Israel. I don't know. But this is God himself saying he will destroy them and bring disaster on them, pursue them with the sword. And that's happening in front of our eyes. And then he says, and I pray for this, my heart, this is what makes my heart race the most. I will set my throne in Elam and destroy her kings and officials, declares the Lord. And then because he's gracious, because he's our God of mercy, he says, I will restore the fortunes of Elam in days to come, declares the Lord. This blows me away because we're in the midst of it right now. And and I'm praying for it. I mean, I know that God prophesies it. I don't know if it's happening this week, this month, this year. I hope it will. I hope it will. I hope it's not a prophecy for another 10 or 15 or 100 years from now, because we need that protection. The world needs that protection, and the Iranian people need that protection. I realize I've gone much longer than I intended. I apologize. I'm going to wrap up with this. My belief, and again, questions are open in a moment. I believe that this, however it needs to end in victory and not capitulation, and not a deal and not a ceasefire. We as Israel can't live with that. We can't keep living with kicking the can down the road of having a nuclear threat pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. Talks of ceasefire for me are silly and scary because if left in place, this Islamic regime will just rebuild. They're messianically, evilly motivated for that. My prayer is that the Iranians will rise up. This is their best, and in my lifetime at least, perhaps the last opportunity that they'll have to take back their country after 46 years since the Islamic Revolution. Um, as the German chancellor noted, this year, this week, Israel's fighting this war for the West. We're doing the dirty work. I hope that the world will recognize that. I hope that the world will get behind us. I hope that we don't see in days to come a moral equivalence and calls for ceasefire because of some silly terms of disproportionality or something else. I do want to end my comments just by again inviting you to connect to Genesis123.co. Come visit, be involved with the projects that we're doing. Yeah, thank you, Marion, for making a note about the questions. But oh, lovely. And I would love to, before we take others' questions, Marion, Mark, Lynn, yes, welcome. What would you like to pick up on? And by the way, I'm happy to go as long as anyone here wants to stay and listen.
Why don't we start with Mark and Lynn, and I'll give a little brief introduction to them because they're my friends that I invited here. Mark and Lynn pastor in Decatur, Illinois, and they have a very strong influence in the United States for Israel, and they're very effective leaders. And Mark was in Israel since the October 7th. So Mark and Lynn, why don't you start with your thoughts and questions or comments?
Excellent. Everybody, this is my wife, Lynn. We pastor together. She's the brains, I'm the brawn. So that's how it works with us. Let me say a couple things just pertaining to, Jonathan, some really strong points that you've made. And from the perspective of an American and maybe even an American pastor, there's two primary things that you brought up that I think are important for us to remember and be prepared for today. One is the conversation of targeting civilians, because of the narrative, the global narrative that's come out since October 7th and the war in Gaza, much of what's communicated has been false. Israel has not been intentionally targeting civilians, but that's what's reported. It's what's reported often, but falsely. So what I do oftentimes we live in the Midwest, and so you're going to have wide swings between very liberal and very conservative, very different, and a wide spectrum of different thoughts on politics. I help bring people back to a place of personal experience. Do you remember when we went to war with Iraq? Do you remember September 11th? Do you remember what the feel and the perspective was in our country after an attack like that? And then are you aware of the civilian deaths that occurred from American soldiers in an American war, both in Iraq and in Afghanistan? And as we compare those findings, anywhere from 150 to 200,000 deaths in Iraq, civilian violent deaths, and 70 to 90,000 civilian deaths in Afghanistan, compared to, in my opinion, extremely inflated numbers with Israel's civilian death in Gaza, which is up in what's the inflated number is 20,000. It's far lower than that, but most of that also is because of the way Hamas operates war.
Yeah.
They use civilians as shields. So we have to compare apples to apples here to debunk this narrative that's communicated. What we will hear and are hearing now is, don't you dare complain, Israel, that they're targeting your hospitals, because you've been doing that to Gaza this whole time. That is false. And if you don't logically argue that, then you just get into an emotional debate, which you're not going to win, right? Because people's emotions are their emotions and they don't need to be true. It's how they feel. So this is important. Jonathan did an amazing job of raising this concern. What I wanted to do just for a moment was help anyone in this chat or watching this video to understand, how do I engage that conversation? How do I come back to, come back in your mind. Not everyone will be old enough to remember who watches this, but for those of us who are, come back to your mind of George Bush standing on a heap of rubble in New York saying, whoever did this, we're coming for you.
That's right.
And we don't apologize. We don't think we acted disproportionately. We are fine with the way we behaved and the way we acted and the things we did. But if that's true, then we have to allow, it's just and right to allow for Israel to defend itself. This is a human right. It's not an American right. It's a human right to defend yourself. And that's what Israel is doing. This is not an aggressive war. This is a defensive war that Israel is taking an offensive lead with, which is appropriate. The other thing that I thought you brought up that I thought was very powerful and that I just wanted to mention was the conversation that finds its root back in this really heretical theology of replacement theology. Jonathan, you mentioned that God is a God of covenant, and that covenant demands that those prophecies, what God said he would do, he would do. He will do it. And that's how prophecy works. For everybody wondering, and I know that there's a lot of questions and comments and thoughts that are going to be news-based and are going to be what's actually happening right now. But let's take a pause and just step back and say, we serve a God, whether I'm Jew or I'm a Christian, we serve a God that is a God of covenant. And that when he enters a covenant, he does not break the covenant. And even when we break covenant, he still holds covenant.
Correct.
And so we have to really come back to this idea, because it's prevalent and it's growing in the church, that the church now is God's chosen people. So why would I care what happens politically with Israel? Israel is nobody. It's just any other person. They're not special. What we're clearly seeing, and what we have to clearly understand as we read the Bible, both Old and New Testament, is that they are special. They're not special because they want to be. Most of the Torah shows you that they didn't want to be special. but they're chosen to be special by God. And so this mindset, this idea, this theological idea comes from a parable that Jesus shared, and it's the landowner parable. And this is the defense that you'll bump up against, and you'll hear it more and more. And the landowner parable is, I leased some land, a vineyard, a beautiful place, to some people. They didn't pay. I sent servants. They beat the servants. I sent my own son. They killed my son. Now I took the land away from them and I gave it to a new people. This is
Mm.
replacement theology at
Mm.
its. However, Jesus at the end of the parable, you'll find it in Matthew, you'll find it in Mark, and you'll find it in Luke. I believe it's Matthew 21. And at the end of the parable, it says the Pharisees and the lawgivers were very upset with Jesus because they knew that he was speaking of them. In my context, it's the same as me. I'm a pastor and a leader at a local church, and I have to operate under a higher responsibility than the congregants do. And if I abuse that or neglect that responsibility, it will be taken away from me. But that doesn't mean it's taken away from the congregants, does it? It just means that I've lost it because of my disbelief or my misbehavior or whatever might have happened with me.
Excellent.
And this is how we combat that argument. We come back to a proper understanding of theology and what Jesus says. One of the most important things I've ever learned in my life, I learned from a professor in my last master's study. He said, we have to let the Bible say what the Bible said. That's it. It doesn't lie, and it can only say what it said. And so for all of those wondering, how do I engage these conversations? And they're going to happen more. And the wars, my prayer with you, Jonathan, is it's a 6-day war. It's over. Let God prove his commitment to the Jewish people and to his own word and will, and let it be quick, and his love for the Iranian people. Pre-1978, Iran was a hub for Christians. It was a hub in the Middle East, in an Arab world, for believers and for evangelism and for all good things. Post 1978 in the Arab Revolution, Iran is a whole different animal.
Yeah.
But make no mistake, the Lord loves them. And the Lord loves all his people, all people. But he is deeply rooted in covenant with Israel. And we will see the fulfillment of prophecy. We will see his hand protect that nation. The question really for us as Gentiles is, where will we be? Who will we be standing with?
And we have to know that today.
And we have to make that decision now. So Jonathan, Marion, thank you both. By no means are we experts, but we are people who are active and committed to advocating for truth, for righteousness, and that includes for the people of Israel, Jews both in America, around the world, and in Israel. And we're committed to learning as well and to growing in what we know. And these moments are hugely, hugely valuable. So we really appreciate your time and thank you for that.
Thank you for that. And I look forward to continuing this offline and maybe taking some of what you're teaching public, not just talking about these are the tools that Christians need to know, but actually let's put them, let's maybe make what's it called? A curriculum.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark and Lynn. Mark, that was most excellent. I knew it would be, but just continue to blow me away. So I know there's people that have questions on the call. I want to make sure that we offer them chance to hear from you, Jonathan. Perhaps even Mark or Lynn might have more response as we hear the questions. But a question that I want to raise, and I want to first of all affirm everything that Mark just said. We must know our theology. As both Jew and Christian, I love that. Let the Bible say what the Bible says. And we have to know that because we are bombarded with information and it is incorrect. I was looking at social media just yesterday morning and saw this horrific video that was so clearly AI that was mistelling the story. And I just felt like a little bit of anger rise up in me. And I thought, we've got to know where to get our information. And, and I do listen to some, different news sometimes so that I can see what they're saying. Because I know they're not going to report it correctly. And when I'm listening to those, I know that's what they're doing. And you have to be very careful if you do that. But I do encourage us to listen to the correct information and know where you're getting your information, because quite honestly, social media is not a news station. It is a whatever they want to say station and get on your rally. And what you said about the and Jonathan, the whole concept of knowing that Israel is fighting this with honor is very huge to all of us.
Mm.
But of course, that's not what's being said. That is not the story that's being told. That's not the picture that's being painted. The picture that's being painted is Israel kills children. And you know, it's mind-boggling how everyone is getting to this place, but they are. And so we need to tell the real story. We need to, as Mark said, our voice really matters right now. And we need to stand up with our voice. I will express one of the concerns that has risen in my heart with consistency, and that is the financial state of Israel. I am very concerned about Israeli people. When you say that you walk through the mall and only the grocery store was open, what I know as both a minister of the gospel and a marketplace minister, things can only sustain so long when the financial duress, such as this war and such as what you're going through, that this is a global problem that is the world is causing a financial duress for Israel. And I don't know that I'm bringing it up because I have answers. I just know it's something that we who pray need to pray for the financial security of Israel, because Israelis that are not able to work because they're in bomb shelters, this means money isn't being exchanged. Israelis that once made their living off of American citizens and global people coming to the Holy Land and wanting to walk the land of Israel and wanting to be in Israel, people are not going. And so, you know, these things cause a financial duress. And I can't help but continue to be in prayer over that and praying for financial freedom and financial blessing. And if you all would join me in that, I just feel like the Lord put this on my heart to pray for financial blessing for Israeli people, the people of Israel, because that will be giving Israel back to all of us, understanding that Israeli people being in financial duress hurts everyone who loves Israel. All of us hurt for that. And with their sons and daughters being off to war, moms and grandparents and whatnot having to manage, as you said, the four littles running to the bomb shelter. These are unthinkable things that you are facing. And one, I just want to say, Jonathan, I'm literally heartbroken. I have shed so many tears over this because I love so much. And as Jonathan mentioned several times, I've been in your home, Jonathan, and I know you to be one of the most remarkable human beings I've ever met. And you and your family are amazing people, and I'm so honored to be a part of what you do. Um, I know there's other questions, so maybe we should field some of those
Sure.
questions because we have gone past the time of the hour. But I know I also heard you say, Jonathan, you're willing to stay on a little bit
I'm
more.
willing to go as long as people have questions, and if people need to leave, uh, then identify that. I'll take questions in any order, but we'll go as long as necessary. This is I hope I gave you some important information, personal insight, but this to me is the important part.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think we've covered some really important pieces, at least that people that I know are asking.
yeah,
They're asking, how do we defend ourselves against a media that has gone haywire.
So the way to answer that, Marion, is that we need to have truth. We need to have facts. I am a source. There are many sources. I deliberately choose, because I mix my opinion and politics with in my writing. I deliberately do not distribute my writing and other op-ed type things through Genesis 1, 2, 3, because I'm here to build bridges, not to be polarizing, and the opinion of the writer I don't want to associate, even though I don't go way out of the way. But on that, but so anyone who wants to be on my personal list, I'm happy to. Anyone who ever wants to reach out and just ask questions, I'll answer to the best of my ability. Susan, you're asking a couple of good questions, and anyone, please use the Q&A. Support. What about the mainstream Israeli media? Is it supportive? Yes, absolutely. We are seeing tremendous across the board. We're seeing tremendous support. There was an article in Friday's Jerusalem Post, which is sort of the way we unwind Friday and over Shabbat, saying that 80% of Israeli Jews and 70% of Israelis are supportive of the attack. We were a little bit surprised that it's only 80% of Israeli Jews and only 70% on the whole. The percentage of Arab Israelis who were supportive of attacking Iran was much lower on a proportional basis, enough to bring down the national support by 10 solid percent. I would love to see what the questions were and why people might have been less supportive. You also asked, Susan, is there any possibility the Mossad operatives might be able to perform sabotage on Fordo? I can tell you, I'm not a military expert. I would have never imagined that we would have seen the level of most intelligence and penetration inside Iran as quickly and successfully. And by the way, the very fact that Israel was expecting 4,000 casualties in the initial first wave of this indicated that maybe we weren't even sure that we would be as successful. Is there a plan for Fordo? I'm sure there must be. Is there a plan for Fordo that does not include an American B-52 bomber or bunker buster missiles? There has to be, because you can't go into this without a strategy to win, not to defer. But I don't know what it is, and of course, if I did know what it is, I wouldn't be able to say. But I pray for that. I do, as I said during my earlier comments, I do believe this needs to be ends in complete victory. Okay, Susan. Also, you asked the earlier possibility of conservative Iranians staging a revolution. I don't know who's conservative or not. I do believe, I mentioned at the outset my friend Marzi Amirizadeh. For those who are pastors here or attend a church, you must have her come speak in your church. I, as an Orthodox Jew, find her faith, her strength, her courage, her testimony to be remarkable. And she shares with me updates from Iran on a pretty regular basis, saying that most Iranians are in fact against the regime and wildly supportive of Israel. And part of her ministry, New Persia, is a restoration of relationships between Jews and Persians and Israel and Iran. So will Iranians, conservative or not, stage a revolution? I desperately hope so. In one of the conversations that took place in my home over Shabbat, I projected a scenario where when the military losses start to get significant, even more significant, you'll see military leaders and members. When I say military, I'm specifically speaking of IRGC, who will defect, not defect to another country, but who will help create a revolution in order to save themselves and potentially be part of, dangerously so, but part of whatever the next phase is for Iran. Marzi, I think I can say this publicly, believes and prays that Iran one day, and Pastor Mark, you also mentioned it in terms of Christianity in Iran before the revolution, that Iran will yet become a Christian nation. And when God says, I don't know what other interpretations there can be, but why is he going to set up his throne anywhere in Elam? it's not for the Jewish people. So I'm praying for that. Susan, another a lot of good questions, Susan. Are everyday Israelis happy with the plans of Netanyahu and his military advisors? Yeah, I would say that by and large, those people who are of the 80% of Israelis, 70% of Israelis who are supportive of this operation, the majority are supportive of the government's plan and the military's response. And I should note that and we're seeing now for the first time polls, I think, since before the war began on October 7th, before the attack on October 7th, maybe in 2 years or more, we're seeing polls for the first time that if there were an election today, that Netanyahu would be able to win and create a government. Up until 2 weeks ago, all polls were indicating that no, he wouldn't. I'm not using that to say politically I'm for or against Netanyahu, or we should or shouldn't be supportive of him politically, but in terms of the planning and execution, Israelis do seem to be quite pleased as things are going now. George, Global News, part of the major Canadian TV network, decided their report on the war from Israel should focus on the weakening of the Iron Dome system. The main point was that the Iron Dome would be overwhelmed if Iran were to unleash their full power. What's my response that the Iron Dome is weakening and not capable of defending Israel? First of all, let me just explain. Iron Dome is one of three uh, elements of our air defense system, in addition to the Air Force itself. One of them, the Iron Dome, is for short range rockets. And there are two others, and I always I believe the David Sling is the one that's for intermediate range. That would be from Lebanon, Hezbollah. And the Arrow, which is something that was developed some time ago, if I'm not mistaken, and you can check me on this, please, because I don't want to I might be confusing David Sling and Arrow, but I think I've got it right. The Arrow is the air defense system for the missiles that penetrate the atmosphere, like what they're shooting at us now, like what the Houthis are shooting at us from Yemen. So the question is more broad. It's not the Iron Dome per se, it's all of the air defense systems. Statistically, we're still seeing that the average is still running around 90, even 95%. I saw it might be a little bit lower, but there was a report this past week that the Iranians have been learning in this last week, have been recalibrating, have been tweaking and doing things with their missiles that make the detection, the speed a little faster, and therefore the detection and shooting them down a little bit more difficult. It feels to me like we're seeing more hits, but I can't answer that. When we're talking about numerics and polls, there's also the margin of error. I think that anything that I'm seeing may fall within that margin of error. So I don't have a really good answer. But then to go to the last point you made, George, in terms of if they overwhelm us, I think that they may be already beyond the ability to overwhelm us because we have disabled what reports are saying as many as 50% to 2/3 of their missile launchers. That's significant. I will say this in case anyone doesn't ask the question. Someone asked it, I think, in the last briefing I did. Worst case scenario. There are a few of them, but the worst case scenario, I've been up close. I can't show you the picture right now, but I can share it with you. It's actually I had it digitized and put on our YouTube channel. The missiles they're firing are huge. They're about 12, 13 yards long. They carry approximately 1,000-pound warhead, and can reach from Iran all the way to Tel Aviv with reasonable precision. My concern, frankly, is that if they were to remove 5 pounds of the detonation of the explosive and replace it with 5 pounds of nuclear material, just a dirty bomb, that I can't think about. I pray that we will continue to disable them, and that there will not be the scenario that you asked about, more worst case scenarios, George. Carol, thank you. Yes, thank you for your comments. I don't see a question in there. If there's a question, go ahead and, but I do appreciate it. Thank you again for the for the anniversary wishes, everybody. Um, yeah, so just Susan, just email me, and let me make sure I put your email in my, if you want to receive my personal updates and articles, I will be glad to do others. And yeah, I'm happy to schedule others to, as of before Shabbat, two other groups, ministries have asked if I would do a briefing specifically for some of their people. So yeah, I'm happy to do that, specifically or generically. The the conversation is being recorded, and I will send the YouTube channel is Genesis 123 Foundation, but I will send the link probably yet this evening. That's all the questions that have been asked here so far. If there are more, please feel free to put them. Marion, Mark, Lynn, any questions that you have? Anything that you want to or begin to
I would
put
just
over?
add, you know, especially some of the technical questions that we're talking about, Mossad, we're talking about the Iron Dome and David Sling, and just contextualize it and come back, because it's sometimes it's hard for us to. Um, I have a staff, church staff, that's all millennials right now, and millennials have this knack. It's not bad. As a matter of fact, they're the future of the church, and we have to think. My job is to think about how I equip them and mobilize them, not how I make them like me. But sometimes what we do is we become so familiar with winning, we forget how to lose. And any loss, any little loss, then is catastrophic. If your child comes home and says, Dad, I got a 90% or a 95%, are you pleased? Are you upset about the 10%? Like, which one did you get wrong? Like, let's focus on that. The Iron Dome, what Israel is showing you right now is that not only were they prepared, but they prayed. They processed this, they prepared for it, and they implemented it well. And they are a 90 to 95% is insane. We're talking about the occasional hypersonic, which it's going to be hard to shoot down with anything. With the most advanced American tech or Israeli tech, it's going to be hard to hit. So it's likely that what we're seeing is an overwhelming, and what will continue is an overwhelming defensive response. But we're also talking about intensely packed, densely packed populations. Anything hits anywhere and you have damage. You have significant damage. If you've been to Israel, Tel Aviv is jam-packed. I mean, building on top of building on top of building. So this is all, it just needs to be contextualized, because we can see the news and we can see this and we get worried, or we think what's happening, the Iron Domes. No, it's not failing. It's operating excellently. The debris from some of those missiles is causing damage and fire. They're getting shot down and it still causes damage and fire.
That's right.
We expect
Very dangerous, very dangerous.
very dangerous. And the other thing is Mossad, the questions about Mossad. Please make no mistake, and by far not an expert, not just a student. Mossad is the best intelligence operating firm or organization in the world. You can compare it to anything we got, the CIA, the FBI, the special forces. You can compare it to anything in the world, and they are the best. Anybody and everybody will tell you that. If they are a student, if they've studied, they'll tell you that. So they have a plan. They have infiltrated. There is a plan. Whether America allows for the bombers and the bunker busters, we don't know. It'll be what it is. What you can also bet, as a student of history, look back through history. What you can also bet is that no matter what Israel does, they're going to get blamed by someone for doing it.
Even before we do it.
Yes. Yeah. And so this is also why it's very important that believers aren't just reciting a speaking phrase or a statement,
Yes.
but you have some actual understanding and belief that comes from truth and purpose that you can respond to these things with.
Yeah.
Because no matter what Israel does, it's going to be their fault to somebody.
Yeah. Right.
This is the tide we're pushing back, right? This is what we're doing. This is why these Zooms are important. Not just the information. That's hugely beneficial and it's wonderful to hear. It helps us pray. It helps us know how to pray. But we have to remember that what we're doing, it's the same question. I love that you brought up Esther. It's the same question posed to Esther. If not you, the Lord will raise someone else.
That's right.
But then you'll have to live with that.
Yeah.
Like,
And salvation will come from somebody else. He's still
yes.
saying salvation. You're not it. You're not all it, Esther. But someone's going to do it, so may as well be you.
The Lord will do it
Yeah.
through somebody, because the Lord, what the Tanakh, what the Torah shows us is that the Lord partners.
Yeah.
The Lord partners with his people, with people. And so the miracle is going to happen. Our question, the thing we're faced with is, are we going to find ourselves in opposition to the Lord or in participation with the Lord?
Agree.
And so let's make sure we find ourselves in partnership with the Lord. And we do that by staying rooted in what the word says, by hearing what the Lord would say to us through a spirit or through sermon, any other way. But we also get over our own issues. Like, there's so many questions about, not just today, proper questions and really good questions, but within the news and the media and the social media, there's so many questions about the politics. Is the politics of Israel the same thing as the nation of Israel? Is the nation of Israel the same thing as the Jewish population throughout the world? The covenant covers all of
That's
it.
right.
Like, in my own country, I don't like some of the political things that happen, but I'm still an American. I still fly the flag on my front porch. I still believe in who we are and what we're doing, even when I maybe don't like it. So these are all tension points that we
Critical.
have to submit to the Lord and pray through. And
Critical.
I think also what Marion communicated is just the people, seeing the people. Like, how do we get past those tension points? We focus on the fact that these are real human beings. These are people, and their lives matter. And they're loved by the Lord, and they're made in the image of God. Those are the important things that we remind ourselves of.
That's right. Let me, if I may, I just want to pick. I see John asked some questions, and then maybe I'll answer comment on something, and maybe Marion, if we're done, maybe ask you to close out in prayer. But something that you just said, Mark, which is critical and picks up on something that Marion was talking about in terms of the economy. Since the 1980s, I've been speaking and teaching about, Marion, you were talking about the economic impact on all of us, right? Milk, eggs, what all the prices that are going up, the price of our taxes are going up in just about every sphere. Someone's got to pay for all of this. It's not just this week, but for the last 20 plus months. But what I've been talking about for the last, well, however many years it is, it's a long time, more than 33 years, is the fact that we're absorbing the cost on a per capita basis of our defense at a level that's unprecedented, perhaps in human history. And despite that, and talking about what, emphasizing something else you just said, Mark, despite that, we're the land from which the miracles are coming. We're the land that is creating so much good for the world. And I remember speaking I was speaking at a public school in Alabama in the late 80s about this. I never forget it because the kids, I can still see that this is seen. And they were so raptured. I said, this was in the 80s. I said, all the things that Israel's doing great for the world, we're handicapped. We have a hand and a foot tied behind our back because of this expenditure. Imagine if we didn't have to do that. But on the other hand, we are creating these defensive systems that are coveted by the world. So all of that has a tremendous impact. Quickly, Amy, yeah, I'm coming to the U.S., God willing, in middle of August through the first week of September, and then again probably latter half of November into December. And again, I would love to talk about anyone who wants to host me and have these conversations in person. John, it's lovely to see you here. It was great to have seen you in person a few months ago. That was a remarkable day. Best case scenario for the US entering the war, and do I envision boots on the ground by the IDF to end the war? I don't envision, well, technically we have boots on the ground. Mossad, whether it's guys in uniform with M16s or they're just undercover Israelis and Iranians. Technically, we have boots on the ground. Will we be flying transport planes over and actually fighting against the IRGC? Gee, it's hard for me to imagine that, but I wouldn't rule anything out only from the perspective that I pray that our government and military leaders are looking at this as a war we must win decisively and and not kick the can down the road. And I know publicly regime change in Iran is not the agenda of this. We're eliminating the nuclear threat and their ability to make and produce and fire ballistic missiles. But I know no one here in Israel is going to cry over regime change. In fact, quite the opposite. And so to that level, what's my best case scenario for the US entering the war? I feel like I've been on a roller coaster the last several weeks. A lot of it, and I'm encouraged, has been disinformation that's been coming. I don't know if the whole idea of negotiating with Iran over the last 69 days was a complete ruse, or if President Trump actually believed, let's give him a chance. But remember, on day 61, is when this attack took place. So I don't know if when President Trump is saying, "Well, we'll see what we're going to do. People never know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have within 2 weeks, I'll decide." As we see bombers moving in, I don't know. Very honestly, I don't want to see anyone fighting our wars for us, but it's not our war. It's a war for the world. Even if the German chancellor is, or especially if the German chancellor is acknowledging that, I think we're in a world war, and the military victory. I pray for regime change. I pray for a free Iran, and the deterrence that will restore around the world and allies that can create. I mean, think about it, not to get political, but what Jimmy Carter did by abandoning Iran and the Shah in 1979 and set up this where we've been living, the world, since 1979 for 46 years. Imagine, imagine if we could reset the clock to a peaceful, prosperous Iran that wants to be a productive member of the nations of the world, not a nation that's trying to annihilate another nation. I'm praying for that. And can we do that without the US? Maybe. Can it be done a lot easier? And should it be done collectively? I believe so. I'm a dual citizen. I'm a proud American, and I think this is no less America's war. I think that there are Iranian agents deep who have infiltrated the US, and uh, I don't know what it will take, John, but I personally believe that would be a correct path. And I'll say one more thing, because some people can misconstrue also what I'm saying. I believe President Trump is a peacemaker. I believe he wants to make peace. I believe we've seen that. We've seen some failed attempts or not yet materialized attempts, but I believe that that's what he is. Sometimes peace has to come through victory, not a deal. And using the example of what can be set back to a thriving, prosperous Iran, peaceful in this region and the world, honestly, that's what gets him a Nobel Prize, not making a deal, I think. Last comment, John. I hope it is realized that support in the US is not represented correctly by the media. The people in the US are in awe of the IDF and support Trump 100% on moving forward. I hope so. I hope so. Thank you for that. Marion, you get the last word.
Okay. Don't tell that to a woman preacher. It has been a pleasure to be on this with you. I'm thinking of my prayer and Bible reading yesterday. And I actually made a post about this yesterday. And my concentration yesterday was the great love that the Lord has for humanity, has for all of us. And there isn't a scripture that describes that greater for the Christian community than John 3:16. So in John 3:16, it ends and culminates with a command the Lord gives us after we hear about this amazing love, and that is do truth. John 3:21, do truth. I think one of the takeaways I have for this today is do truth. Do truth, and let us be people who do truth. And I want to pray to that end, and I also want to end with understanding that both the Old Testament and the New Testament speak clearly of spiritual battle. This is a spiritual battle at a level that is unprecedented, and we don't ignore the practicalities of war, but we should not ignore the spirituality that we need to do truth on our knees. So I really just call us all to a place of prayer. So I just lift up the name of the Lord. Lord, both to my Jewish friends and family on this call who might be listening, and my Christian friends and family, and those who aren't of the faith, Lord, we know of your great love for all humankind. And it's to that end that we ask, oh God, that this spiritual battle that is facing our world today, it is not a battle that is alone and segregated only to Israel, Lord, but it is our battle as well. And so we choose to fight that battle first and foremost on our knees. And as we embrace the great love that you have throughout the whole of the Bible, Lord, we declare that we would be people who do truth. I speak life and grace and peace over my friend Jonathan and his family. I ask, oh God, for protection over his family, over his friends, his community, Lord, over the entirety of Israel. But Lord, I also make it specific for Jonathan. Lord, I pray for rest for Jonathan. I know he said he got a good sleep last night, Lord, but he needs more than one. And Lord, I pray you would restore his body and give him good strength to carry on the work and the calling and the mission you've put on his life. I ask, Lord, for everyone who is in the sound of our voices that would hear this briefing, that they would hear, oh God, that we love you and we receive your great love. I just pray, oh Lord, that you would bring good resolve and answers to the many problems we have discussed here today. I thank you and I praise you. Amen and amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Everybody, thank you for joining. Marion, Mark, Lynn, thank you for co-moderating. Thank you for being the understudy that wasn't necessary today. And hopefully there won't be any more air raid sirens. And I'll be pleased to continue this with all of you.
Thank
God bless you.
Thank you, Jonathan, for all your work.
Yeah.